Okay, we're good.
Okay, guys, I'm going to start the webinar now.
Okay.
All right, we can get
Hello.
started.
Okay. Hello and welcome to Designer by Designer, IALD's new series of one-on-one interviews with and by lighting designers around the world. My name is Azindil Maghani. I'm the IALD Toronto coordinator, and I'm joined by Amy Hughes, the coordinator from the IALD St. Louis chapter. Together, we are excited to welcome you to the 12th interview in this series with Marcel Dion, IALD, and Randy Burkett, FIALD. Before we begin, we would like to thank our sponsors. The Designer by Designer series is made possible through the generous support of our platinum level sponsors, Access Lighting, Cooper Lighting, Lutron Electronics, and Lumen Pulse. Our gold level sponsors, including Airco Lighting, and our silver level sponsors. Today's interview is being broadcast on Zoom and is being recorded and will be available later to view on YouTube. Randy and Marcel will be happy to answer questions at the end of the interview. So if you are watching with us on Zoom, please use the Q&A option throughout the interview. Now, it's my pleasure to introduce Marcel Dion and Randy Burkett for the 12th interview of IALD's Designer by Designer.
Hello, Randy.
Marcel, how are you?
How are you?
Good.
How's St. Louis?
Well, it's going to be hot and sticky today. It's normal, so I guess that's good.
Hot and sticky.
Yeah, that's part of what happens when you live in St. Louis. You have summers like this, but that's all right. It's a nice place to live.
I gotta visit there one day.
Yeah, anytime.
So, yeah, it was a pleasure to interview you today. I know I had interviewed by me a few weeks ago, which was excellent. So I have some questions for you today that I'm sure everybody will be enjoy the answers. So we have this little thing called the icebreaker. So it's quick little questions to get things going.
Right.
So first thing is teamwork or solo? What would you think?
Yeah, certainly teamwork. They both have their place, but teamwork wins out most of the time.
Yeah. Cold or warm? It could be anything.
Well, since it's midsummer in St. Louis, I'm going to say cold.
Cold. You want the cold. City or country?
Well, I grew up in the country. I dwell in the city. So I'm probably in between, but I'll take the city now, I think. Yeah.
City. I said both as well.
Oh,
Yeah. I like the city, but I like to go camping and enjoy the nature. So yeah, kind of both.
Good. Yeah.
So wine, beer, or water? Everything.
Now I'll try to be discriminating. Wine, I'm more of a wine drinker, although water, I can't survive without that. So between wine and beer, certainly wine. I'm not a guzzler, I'm a sipper, so I like wine.
White or color?
Well, I'll say white because it's composed of all color, the entire spectrum. How's that for
I like that one. Yeah.
informed answer?
There we go.
But,
yeah. Light or shade?
Oh, goodness. Well, again, they both have roles in my life, but I like the shade. Again, I'd rather be in the shade looking into the light.
Yeah, that was my me too.
Yeah.
Day or night?
Well, sometimes I think lighting designers are accused of being creatures of the night. And one of my colleagues was down focusing a project last night in the city after dark while everyone was at the baseball game enjoying themselves. She was hanging out of bucket trucks or something. But in terms of which, I think I prefer the night.
Yeah, I think that's universal. Yeah. Sea or mountains?
Okay. Definitely mountains. I grew up in a landlocked central Pennsylvania and rolling hills more there, but
Yeah.
did a lot of hiking and backpacking in the West, the Rocky Mountains and Arizona and some other places. And yeah, I prefer the mountains.
Yeah. See, for me, I actually said lake because there's no ocean where I am or mountains, but
Well, yeah, they're not far from you though.
not too far.
Yeah.
Paintings or sculptures?
Oh boy, both wonderful art. It's hard for me to discriminate between those two because I enjoy art of almost any kind, but I guess I think the challenges of painting are one that's always intrigued me, and the fact that we can control the light in paintings easier than we can perhaps in a sculpture. So if I was one of them, I'd probably want to be a painter.
A painter. Rock or pop? I think I'm more of a music thing.
Yeah, well, it's got to be rock.
Rock.
Yeah. I could have dressed differently had I known that was going to be one of the questions. So.
And favorite band? Like
favorite band?
Yeah.
Oh well,
rock.
Of course, here I'm going to give away some information here. Led Zeppelin.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
But that's just one. Right? The Beatles are my all-time favorite. But
Okay.
That's probably so typical of an answer. I thought I'd throw in Led Zeppelin, who accompanied me through college. So.
Oh, excellent. And today or tomorrow? That's what. Today or tomorrow?
Yeah, tomorrow. I always, whenever I get to the day I'm in, I'm never fully satisfied. I always think tomorrow's going to be even more interesting or challenging, or in some cases better. Occasionally I'll have some disdain for tomorrow, going to the dentist's office or something, but
right.
I'm always looking ahead. So tomorrow.
Tomorrow. Okay, cool. Well, actually, you mentioned before where you're from. You said Pennsylvania. Yeah,
central Pennsylvania, a fairly rural and bucolic area. Small town. Name of the town is Du Bois. It's I'm sure in French it isn't, but it was anglicized years ago, and it's central, slightly to the west of the center of the state. And I spent my formative years there. I went to college at Penn State University, architectural engineering, which was where everybody did who lived in Du Bois. But I really found my way though at university as to what I wanted to do. And I'm getting off the track. You just were asking about hometown.
No, actually. So I know from a small town, going from there to, largest city, and then obviously, working on projects internationally, I had that experience going from a small town as well.
Yeah.
How do you expand, and how do you, going from a small town to internationally, how did you adapt through career? Like how did you feel like?
Interesting question. Yeah, it depends on what stage of my career. Just going to Penn State was a big deal. It was, wasn't my little hometown. So that's a university of some 40 to 50,000 students. So that was a big step up in social intercourse, because you get to talk to a lot more people than I did in a small town. But I think the step, fast forwarding to design practice, I never really quite think about international and being different than local with regards to general approach. Of sure, there's different things we do as designers, but I really don't see that as a way to color my impression of the world. I love traveling, Paris, London.
Mhm.
I like traveling Europe a lot. And in the United States, I do a lot of traveling with my work. Not as much right now or the past 3 years,
Mhm.
perhaps, but so I really enjoy going to different parts of the country and world and to Canada. Been there a
Mhm.
number of times. Done a couple of small projects, not a lot of work, but it's the international thing never was an issue for me. I didn't think about it as being um, daunting or overwhelming. Oh, what am I going to do traveling here and there? It just seemed like an extension of my professional life is to just happen to have use a plane or an automobile to get there.
Yeah, I guess, I mean, from the small town to international, it's wide open. Instead of the reverse, I guess, from a larger city like New York, you're already involved, and I think growing from there is more difficult. But I think I had the same experience. It was a wide open, so it was very receptive.
Yeah, that's a good point, Marcel. I think the fact that you're not exposed to I guess I was to a city a couple of times when I was younger. We'd go to Pittsburgh for the Pirate baseball games or
Mhm.
Steeler football games or something. But uh, those infrequent visits didn't necessarily set the tone. But having an open mind when you start to get into urban areas, my first job was in Denver, Colorado, and that was the first city I ever lived in during
Yeah.
my life, and that was a big change. And it, I seemed to fit in pretty well, and I was comfortable with it, and I immediately liked urban life. Lived just on the outskirts of Denver, but spent a lot of time in the city and
Mhm.
parks and so forth.
Yeah.
So that's an interesting way of looking at it, though. I hadn't thought about where as part of what we do, other than perhaps the way it colors as a designer, how it colors my impression of how we're going to create something.
Yeah, I think it all matters. Who inspires you in the past or today?
Yeah.
You-
Yeah, I think there's inspiration all around. When you think about people, I was very fortunate. I was just mentioning this in a presentation setting a couple of weeks ago that when I mentioned Penn State, and I just happened to be there during the time of John Flynn, who was a seminal figure in early in lighting design and the impact of lighting on psychological impressions and how spaces are perceived by their users. And that's really the hook and what got me into lighting design. He was my mentor as well, but I would say certainly a thorough inspiration. He had come to Penn State from Kent State, and before that from General Electric, where he did a lot of work at the World's Fair in 1965 in New York, and did some really interesting research at Kent State, which he brought to Penn State.
Mhm.
And to be able to, I was actually, like many of my fellow students, I was one of the guinea pigs in these experiments that where we would go into spaces and with different lighting conditions. And at the time, we were just sort of learning about that. But
Right.
that was a foundation of some of the research that John did, John Flynn. And I was just so impressed with knowing that I could manipulate in a positive way people's feelings and how they feel about a space or orientation, or are they frightened, are they happy, and those kinds of things could be impacted by the way a space was lit. And that's probably, if there's one thing I took out of the university and still hold dear today,
Mm.
it's that. Everything we do, we talk about those things, and as most designers do, I think. But to be able to get it firsthand and from someone I respected so much, I think that was my biggest inspiration. Now, since then, I'm mostly inspired by the work that people do, I think, and then being able to follow up and talk to them about it. One of my good friends was Jonathan Spears, who left
Mhm.
us far too early, but he and I were pretty good friends, and we would talk about design. And I was always loved the work of their office, their studio, and still do to this day. But he was very down to earth, and that was
Mhm.
something that always hit home for me, because I came from a fairly humble beginnings in a small town, and
Yeah.
he was the same way. No pretense. There wasn't any, oh, here comes Jonathan.
Mm.
And so just being able to talk about the work and what what inspired us about that. And I think there are other lighting designers and lighting professionals along the way who had similar influences. People like Dave DeLora from a technical stand. He's a brilliant man. And much of what I learned from him when I was a committee member, when I was right out of school in one of his committees at the IES. And I felt, oh my gosh, what am I doing in this room with all these people that are much smarter than me? But
Right.
he made me feel very comfortable in the committee, and I became an active member of that committee and absorbed constantly like a sponge. So I think a lot of inspiration comes in, they come in different ways from
Mhm.
different people, and not always the when you expect it.
Yeah, no, actually, that's nice. I mean, you're from school. What you've learned is, I mean, we're still learning today, and I think we're just starting to apply those, which is very interesting. And
Agreed.
what you were saying about humble, Jonathan being humble, and yourself as well, I have to say, and because of the smaller town, like I think that's part of it is, and when we're at a conference together, lighting designer, we're just people
Yep.
enjoying what we do. And there's no big runaway and people causing attracting to themselves, which is I think that's the nice thing about us lighting designers. We are small, but we're just a bunch of friends really hanging out,
Yeah,
putting lights.
what's a very quick side note to that. A number of years ago, I was attending one of the IALD Enlightened conferences, and I had to be a presenter later in the week. But when I first got there, I met, at the time, was a new person working with the IALD. It was their first conference, and so I said hello and introduced myself. And then later in the week, actually, the very final session was going to be we all get together and have a kind of a town forum and so forth. So that individual had went ahead and was at the space to check people in and so forth. And he had gotten there early, and I was getting there early because I was going to be participating. And I said, well, Doug, you're new to the ILD. You'd come from an accounting background. And I
Right,
said,
right.
what do you think of the lighting design folks? And he kind of shook his head and he said to me, he said, I've never met a group of people so passionate about what they do as you people.
Yeah.
I've been in, he's saying this, Doug says, I've been many places with many groups and many conferences. And this one, it's a different thing. It's a different feel. You all think collectively, you think alike with regards to your mission and your goals and how you can impact the world. And it's so refreshing and exciting. I love being here. And that's kind of, it was nice to hear that from someone who doesn't have our framework, even though you characterized it, Marcel, I think perfectly. And hopefully most of the people, or the people who will see this, will be shaking their heads yes as well.
Yeah, and inspiring the next generation to just join the little family. We're all nice.
Yeah, sure.
Mhm. How did you get involved in lighting? Like in the past, like how did lighting come up?
Well, I think when I was younger, I didn't know it at the time, but it meant a lot to me in the way I made judgments and I might the way I observe the world.
Yeah,
I look back on it and say, lighting was already playing a subconscious role at that point. But really, I was the interest in lighting did not come at that stage. When I mentioned I went to Penn State and was in the architectural engineering program, but it wasn't because of lighting. It was because I really loved architecture, but I enjoy being a little nerdy kid too. So
Mm.
how am I going to do that? What am I going to do in college? And then I found, architectural engineering. So I could be both, at least for 4, in this case, 5-year program. And but once inside the architectural engineering program, I uncovered this gem, lighting, where we can do both. And in fact, to this very day, and I tell it to other folks too, that the morning might be taken up talking about technical matters in lighting and rigorously technical. But in the afternoon, we may be using our arms like this to talk about the feeling of the space or what we're trying to achieve in a particular area. And as far as I know, probably until I'm out of this career, that's what I still like about it. I can still be both. I can still continue to hone my technical skills and, but at the same time, be an artist,
Yeah.
at least try to be in both cases.
Yeah, I guess that's the art and science of it all. And
Yeah, it's really
yeah.
true.
Yeah. And actually the beginning of what you said is very similar to my starting. It's just, yeah, we're just a little bit more sensitive for some reason, but
Yeah.
glad that there's actually something that we were able to, grow into and create something with it and enjoy
Yeah.
every day.
Yeah. And sometimes I overthink things. I'll go into a restaurant with a group, and if the windows are particularly bright, I quickly put my back to them. So I can see the people I'm with very easily. And unfortunately, I'm in silhouette, but I'm making subconscious lighting decisions all the time, it
Yeah.
seems.
Yeah, good. Yeah, absolutely. So I'm going to go ask you a little bit of your past. So before, I guess from your practice, when you left HOK, and then you wanted to open up your own practice, what was the thought of opening up your own? Like, because I know you were doing lighting, but why did you open something on your own?
Yeah, the motivation there is somewhat interesting. When I left university, I went to work for actually a manufacturer, Holophane, for 2 years. And Professor Flynn had said, I had several opportunities when I was leaving the university, and he said that Holophane would be a good one. They were at a good company in optics, and had a really well-respected firm. And if you want to continue to hone your technical skills, that could be a good option for you. And ultimately, that's what I did. But then after a couple of years, I found a design position. I was getting antsy to do design work and at HOK here in St. Louis. And I was there for about 8 or 9 years and had ended up being, I ascended to the head of lighting design for HOK. And, and it was good. I was really enjoying myself. But I was also thinking, you know what, HOK is a wonderful company. Their design sensibilities are really great. They were doing good corporate work for when I was there and other things, and still respect them immensely. But I was interested in working with other design philosophies, frankly, other architects, interior designers, other people who are interested in lighting. And I said to myself one day, I tell this story quite a bit, is that I said, am I going to be here when I retire in 30, 40, whatever number of years, or not? And I could answer that question pretty quickly to say, no, I don't want to be here, although HOK is probably one of the better firms for making a landing point. I want to get out and explore. So that's what really pushed me out the doors. And I think that was my motivation. And I had a couple of clients when I was at HOK that said, oh, Randy, we want to hire you for lighting and nothing else. So we would use our department. We would be just doing lighting only projects. So I think I knew that there could be a market for that. And of course, during those days, lighting design was not a well-established profession outside of the coasts, especially New York and maybe LA. But there were a few folks out there who encouraged me and said, well, Randy, you do good work. If you want to do that, give it a shot. So I guess that's how I got my fortitude to move forward.
Excellent. Yeah. No, it's again, for the newer generation getting involved is, I know recruiting is always a difficult part of, what is lighting and stuff, and because there's just limited schools. But I think that, the exploration of working with others and just the different types of projects you can do, again, interior, exterior, that's, you can do that when you're kind of, on your own practicing lighting that's what it is. You're practicing lighting, which is always that's inspiring on its own.
Yes, agreed. Yeah.
So how was the first year when you started the business?
Well,
more of a business question.
Like so many fledgling companies, I started by myself and had one other professional who worked out of their home as well as I was. I was still fairly young then, so my wife and I had a home in the city, St. Louis City, a little brick bungalow, quite small. But I made the basement our office, and at least for that, what would be about 6 months. And so, as you might imagine, a few of you out there are probably shaking your head. Oh yeah, I know that. Working
Yeah.
out of my bathroom or whatever. But we also as a that in of itself was a challenge, but I got by that. But some of the quick interesting story when we were also, and still to this day, are pet lovers, and at the time we owned 4 ferrets.
Oh.
Well, the ferrets lived in the basement as well. So they would get mischievous at night, and occasionally I would come down and find out they've taken my T-square underneath the washer or dryer or
Oh.
something like that. And so it's nice to have those kinds of humble beginnings when it's starting a new firm too. But that got me out in 6 months, and I was in an office. But it was a good first year, frankly. I learned, I met a couple of really interesting clients, or would become clients, and be a couple of them being lifetime clients, or a long time at least. And I think once those first few steps were available and I got through that, and then I had something I could market with, and it didn't take too long, as one built on the other, and that's how you build a practice, at least in part.
Yeah, no, exactly.
How about you? What do you? What I remember listening to you, but what was your key first year hurdle? Or
Yeah, well, it's very similar. I mean, I was in a basement, not for 6 months. It's actually almost for 10 years.
oh my,
But it was very comfortable. We recently moved now. I mean, a brick larger bungalow. I moved, upgraded to the main floor. We're more natural like. But it was like that. Yeah, you just start slow. And one client became 2, and then 3, and then after really a few years, you realize, yeah, I can do this. Yeah, there is the market. There's the need, especially in Canada and Toronto, a much smaller market, that we needed some help. Yeah, very similar. And I've heard that story before. It's just kitchen table kind of thing.
Yep.
I mean, in the past, we don't need space for a big drafting table anymore, but we do need space for mock-ups in the basement, living room. I had stuff all over the place. Luckily, my wife's in the same business, so she knew why I had a large facade lighting in the middle of the living room. But I think that a lot of stories like that is very similar. Growing. If you're, I mean, most of the firms I know are small, are in lighting. They're 1, 2, 3 throughout, right? And
That's
I think, I mean, again, for yourself, congratulations on the merger. And I mean, how big is your office now?
We have 11, I think.
Yeah,
on the,
very small, right? Very intimate.
Yeah, but we like it that way. I've kept my practice, even before this union, kept it quite small. I was not interested in having a larger firm. I liked a very focused firm. We always work together, and not that they can't be successful with larger firms, certainly, but that was my taste. And so that's the way we approach projects. And I think we even got to a point where we could kind of pick and choose our directions as to what kinds of projects we wanted, and it wasn't over. And there's an advantage in part of being in the middle of nowhere from a lighting design standpoint. At least it was at St. Louis. There weren't any other practitioners, but now we have 4 or 5 other small firms like ours in St. Louis, and we're a much smaller pond than New York or Montreal or LA. And but that's good. I like the competition because it raises all the boats. It really does, to get people. The better the projects we have out there, whether you do them, Marcel, whether I do them, whether Amy does them, who's going to be on the call later, it helps us all. It raises the credibility of the profession, which is what we're aiming to do, I think.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. And here we're all friends and competitors. And the industry is very, it's very unique that way. We want you or the other ones to get hired. And we're happy to see a lighting designer getting on that project. Like, great, you got a lighting designer. That's the first step.
Yeah, that's absolutely right.
Yeah, the same thing.
Yeah.
So after all these many years, is there a favorite project that comes around? or maybe a few with so many projects around?
Projects are sort of like children. You really don't want to show favorites, nor do you. Uh, I- Sometimes I use the cliche, well, it's the next project, of course, but there are projects I think, collectively in our studio use as touchstones.
Mhm.
And for different reasons. We lit Eero Saarinen's arch here in St. Louis a number of years ago. We've lighted it twice now,
Yeah.
with new technologies more recently. But that project is as beautiful as the arch is. Actually had what I mentioned earlier in the discussion. It had both art and science to the nth degree, trying to study the illumination of a stainless steel surface. What does it
Mhm.
look like straight on? What does it look like across the Mississippi River? What's it look like if you're coming in from the north obliquely to the arch? What do you see? And we had to do roll up your sleeve calculations, but we did a lot of mock-ups, and at night we had to do all our mock-ups between midnight and 6 a.m. So
Yeah.
the public didn't know what we were doing. That was with the National Park Service. So, okay. But then the art is really what it's about. It's a beautiful piece of architecture, and we don't want people coming up and saying, "Oh, this is a beautiful piece of lighting." They're not going to say that. I mean, the
No.
average person in the street, they're going to say, "Oh man, that's a breathtaking view of that structure." So
Yeah.
I think I say that's a touchstone in that I hope those are the hallmarks of our practice, that the technical rigor that's necessary, sometimes it's much, sometimes it's not so much. It's maybe just a matter of course, so that you know what you need to do, and the other the same way. And so we look at a lot of projects this way, where um, the end is almost always a mix of the two extremes of right brain and left brain,
Mhm.
and it really is just depends on the need of the project, and in many cases the client. I think so. I think the arch, which is really the Gateway Memorial, Expansion Memorial is its real name, but the arch that everyone calls it, was probably one of the better examples of that. We've done many wonderful projects with wonderful clients, so I'm not shorting any of them. We've had opportunities to do
Mhm.
things that I, frankly, even when I started my practice, would not have dreamt of. I mean, the arch, let's face it, it's in my backyard, so to speak.
Exactly.
But
Yeah.
we work with David Mintz, another lighting designer, on the Martin Luther King Memorial in
Right.
Washington, and we've done bridge projects that really interesting projects, challenging. I think the challenges really really raise it for us. We try to, if the challenge is really difficult, we try to roll up our sleeves and really, okay, well, let's see. And
Yeah.
so,
Yeah. Exactly.
yeah. So I wouldn't want to mention too many projects, because, like I said, the next one's probably the favorite.
Well, I know that's exactly the kind of the answer is. I had the same question, and for me, it was a hometown project.
Oh,
So it was special, not
yeah.
necessarily the grandest, but there's an aspect of the artistic impression of my project, and also the technical thing, and also the budget constraint of a small town. So it's like it's kind of you like on mock-ups and trying to figure out the solution, even though at the end, no one will actually know it was actually a lighting project. They just see the beautiful arch, which I think
Yeah.
is one of the goals that we try to achieve. It's like we look at it, it's like, oh,
Yeah.
look at this. It's a great.
Yeah.
And then no one knows who you are.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's spot on. And I did hear your discussion of your hometown project. I, the, when I think about inspirational issues, when I was younger, and even today, of course, I looked to. I was a big sort of an avid movie goer. Small town, couple of theaters is all one screen each, but I'd
Yeah.
love to go to movies. But as I got into the university and took some film studies as well, I realized how powerful light was in these films, and how we all know this. We've been to theaters, we've been to films that if you have any lighting bone in you, you see things that, oh yeah, they're showing Darth Vader in silhouette because he looks more menacing. I remember seeing when I was in college in film class, we would see a new film every week, and then the intervening lecture you'd have a discussion. And the time I saw Citizen Kane, I remember saying, oh my gosh, there's things here I've never seen or never really noticed and understood. And that carries over to lighting. And one of my colleagues, and you know him, I think, was Phil Gabriel. And he did a couple presentations at the IALD conference in Lighting about the influence of lighting in film. And he was spot on in some of his observations. I think that's an inspiration to a lot of us when we think about that. As well as, of course, the natural world. But I know I look to other media or other forms of art, art itself. You mentioned painting and sculpture earlier, and film are just treasure troves, or can be, for an understanding of light and how it behaves.
Is there a project or like you're saying, more inspiration or something that you enjoyed from another designer that you've seen in the past, like, wow, that's a great project, like even if it's visually stunning or just learning technically how they achieved it?
Yeah, there are a number of them. I think one of the things I take pride in is what the ILD has been able to do with the awards program, and every year it gets probably tougher and tougher to win awards, but
Very tough.
yeah. I mean, we've won our share, but it's difficult. But that's not what it's about.
No.
And in the end, but almost every project that we see now has an element of wow. Not wow as in, boy, that's really over the top and wonderful, but how did they do that in some cases? Or in some cases, frankly, how did they convince the client to do that, right? So I don't know whether there's one project I look to. I don't really like calling out projects from individual designers, but I mentioned Jonathan Spears earlier. Some of his work and his studio's work I've admired for years. And frankly, probably most of the lighting designers that I've known, if only through their work, I've seen things that I've appreciated and took to heart and thought about what that meant. I do think the way when we do look at other work that we feel is really worthy lighting design, and worthy meaning lighting's living up to its expectations and what it can do to support what it is that's being lighted. Oftentimes it comes in so many different packages. Some of the quietest projects or smallest projects, one can see the simplicity of design and how the fundamentals of light are realized in creating an incredible space. So a lot of the work done in Japan and some of the other Asian countries, that there's several of my colleagues there who have been doing work that it's just magnificent and almost sublime when you see it, and you want to run and see it. I'd like to see projects like that where it's obvious that without the lighting, it would be diminished. Without the lighting that was done, it would be diminished.
Yeah, no, it's I know one thing I've learned from other projects is the backstory, really, not merely the end photo, but is and I think you mentioned in some of your talks in the past, what I joined was the mock-ups, the importance of mock-ups and learning from mock-ups, and go out and mock up things. And I tell people to take a flashlight and shine things up, and you just see things in a different way. So like these days, you think we're not doing enough mock-ups? How, what's the importance of getting off the screen and just go out?
We would love to do mock-ups on every project. And whether that means mocking up some lighting on an existing structure, existing building, which is ideal, we can go out. most of the decisions our clients make during mock-ups, they feel so much more confident of
Mhm.
them because they've seen it. And we know how to, we being lighting design professionals, we know how to reveal what it is we're trying to do with light, and to take them out to a building and exterior or a piece of sculpture or whatever, or in some cases interiors, of course, and to be able to demonstrate, here's what we're trying to achieve. And can you imagine all 32 columns like that, or everybody's private office and this sort of thing. And we can demonstrate why the proper lighting is valuable.
Mhm.
I would like to see mock-ups on every project when one can. And when we can't, with new projects, we do a lot of rendering now.
Yeah.
And not necessarily calculated renderings as in programs that provide those.
Mhm.
We often just continue to use Photoshop. And the reason we do is, first of all, we better understand how light behaves and knowing how to reveal it in renderings. And as opposed to what I would call small a, artistic rendering of lighting. Oftentimes we'll get a nighttime rendering from the architect and say, light doesn't behave that way.
Exactly, right? Where's the light coming from? Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. So we do understand it, as a lighting professionals understand it, and we can. What we like to do, if we can, is go out to the finished product, be able to hold the rendering right up next to it and say, this is what it was like. We don't have to do that very often, but mock-ups, there's nothing better. And students, I still do some teaching, and being able to take students or people who are learning about lighting out to a mock-up, and it's just wonderful to see them, we'll move it over a little further, things like that.
Yeah, exactly.
One of my first presentations years ago at an IES conference in Minneapolis, I'm really dating myself, I forget when that was, but I submitted something, and we did a presentation of the use of mock-ups, and we held it at a series of grain silos right outside Minneapolis. Minneapolis is, of course, a big community for grain and the shipping of grain. And we would take floodlights at the time. At that time, it was like stone knives and bearskins, but we would take floodlights and we would move them in and out and show what happens to light. And we would then maybe put filters on them. And people just learned so much about that. I remember them all talking on the bus going back to the IS hotel about, you'd love to see that happen.
Yeah.
Those kinds of, there's people just really understand light when they get to see it firsthand.
Yeah, it's always different, I find.
Yeah.
I mean, I the same thing, you go mock it up with the client and you got to tweak it. You're like, oh, no, let's, again, just move it over an inch, and it's totally different. And explaining it, right? Light is very, it's very narrow, it doesn't move, but there's some variations that you could achieve by just tweaking it a little bit. It's not all numbers, right? I think that's one thing is hard to explain on some clients. Like, it's not just a number. There's the artistic feel of it, and what you see on paper. Yeah, that is a lot of fun with the mock-ups. Yeah, definitely. When I have the chance, like you, it's like I wish, every project we can do a mock-up. It is fun for sure. Getting those samples. Yeah, getting those samples, right?
We had this is just a quickie. A couple of years ago, we did a master plan for the city of San Antonio, a lighting master plan. And in one of the presentations, we were trying to drive home the importance of subduing glare in the urban environment so that people can see better, of course, but also that they can realize there's a storefront, there's a lighted building, and all of that richness would come alive if you could minimize glare. And so for that presentation, they were getting ready to go, and so I was coming up to give this short introduction, some comments to the public. It was one of the public forums we did, and just as I was going up there, I went over to the side of the stage or the platform, and I turned on this incredibly glary light source, and it was right in the line of sight if you were looking at me, and it was just behind me. And I started to give the presentation as if I was doing that on purpose. And I was, of course, to demonstrate to them, you're having trouble seeing me? And of course, they kind of hold their, and I said, well, that's glare. and we would turn that off, and then we would start that discussion about
Mhm.
why that destroys the quality of the visual environment. And in that case, I overdid it, but it made the point, and they helped them understand that disciplining the glare in our visual environments, being able to control it when we can, and when we can't, at least taking it into account, can be paramount importance in urban, any community, but in urban environments particularly.
Yeah. Do you think we overlight our environments in standards today? I think I'm asking for, your expertise in your career of how things were lived
Yeah.
before and today's standards. I just feel we're just, yeah, it's just different.
Oh, yeah. Generally speaking, I think we overlight many of the environments collectively as a society. Um, I think there's the IES in North America has done a pretty good job in recent years of starting to bring clarity to how much light is really needed, especially in areas that should have less light, whether they're parks or smaller communities and so forth. Not to mention the potential of where does that light go? Even if you're good at disciplining the light, eventually a lot of that makes it into our skies. So, but I would say that generally there are a lot of overlighted areas, but uh, I think there's a move afoot now to do less of that, especially in environmentally sensitive areas,
Mhm.
because there's a social conscious now that realizes that we're losing a lot of um, our connection with the environment, the natural environment, because of the way we light it, or light areas adjacent to it mostly.
Yeah.
Uh, so we have to coexist better with that, and it may some folks think that it means having sanctuaries, in essence, areas like a national park where light levels are so subdued that you can lay in the grass and see the Milky Way, which
Yeah.
no one sees that anymore in major cities, and you have to go somewhere else. And I remember being young and seeing that on a camp out in the Rockies, and it was like I was transported to another planet to be able to
Absolutely.
see the Milky Way stretched across. And I'd probably say that probably fewer than 20% of our children ever get to see that
Mhm.
in their youth because of where they live. So we're not going to solve that problem per se. We're not going to go to New York and all of a sudden you can see the Milky Way. But there
Right.
is responsibility, I think we have to understand how to use light, use it effectively, and do it in a way to be as sensitive as possible.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I mean, how do you feel about because the dark sky, right? And then the pollution and uplighting. How do you feel like uplighting? Like, is it something that you're like conscious now these days? Like, oh, should we uplight? Should we not uplight? What's the best approach? Is it, like,
Yeah, well, I'll have to say this is one of the hardest things we wrestle with in our practice is when to use light that is upwardly focused, um, and how much, if we do use it, how much do we use it? And we're constantly putting, I think, measures in place when we do use uplight or light above 90 degrees to manage that. Sometimes it's a curfew, meaning that 10
Mhm.
o'clock every night it's turned out or it goes down to 30% output.
Yeah.
Uh, but I have to admit, to this day, I still have problems as to when we shouldn't use light in certain ways. We all know that a beautifully flattered facade from the base of a column, or maybe there are some good alternates to that, but in many cases that may be the best way to do it visually.
Mhm.
But does it need to be done, or is it done for a certain amount of time? We mentioned earlier the arch here in St. Louis. One of the things that all that is lit from below in buried vaults. That was part of the criteria, was we couldn't attach anything and it couldn't be seen during the day.
Right.
But we incorporated a salometer in that project, which would measure particulates in the atmosphere. And if it got above a certain level, we knew the light was scattering more, and it will shut down the light sources at that point.
Oh, okay.
And in addition to that, there are now 2-3 week periods for migrating waterfowl where the lights are turned off and there's no disorientation. And we do that a lot when we do bridges and other areas near sensitive zones, when you have indigenous creatures and waterfowls, or critters as some of my colleagues like to call them. We try to look at ways to minimize that impact, whether it's through less use of the light, or light of fewer times of the day, or in some cases wavelength. We all know about turtles, and that we've done some work along the coast, and we don't want turtles to run out into traffic. So we want to be conscious of wavelength and what role that plays. And there's a lot more to be known about that. And I'm on several committees of the IES where we're wrestling with those issues right now.
Yeah, actually, I think we're almost close to our time for our interview, which was fantastic. But I did have a question on your committees, because being involved, on those committees, and enjoy your talks about them. What's next? What you were mentioning about what's the next committee that you're working on, and
Well, well, the profile of the work we do in our practice 25 years ago was probably 75, 80, maybe 85% of the work was interior lighting. Today, at worst case, it's even 50% exterior environments, outdoor environments, 50% interior. Part of that is because we've become known for doing those kinds of large scale projects, but there's a lot of interest in revitalizing urban communities. There's some urban strife is very visible right now in our country and maybe other places. And part of the way, one way to make cities more livable is to have light to play a bigger role, but a more successful role than it does now. So I'm on two committees of the Illuminating Engineering Society. They're looking at outdoor lighting standards. We just finished the new recommended practice, which I would encourage everyone to go and see, the IES library, which talks about lighting design, not in foot candles and lux. There's a little bit of that in there, but that's not the main part of the document. It talks about orientation, visual hierarchy, color, things such as impacts on animals and flora and fauna. Although, like I said earlier, the research is not that deep, but that's going to have to be continuing to grow. But I think these are the kinds of documents we need for practitioners to use, and for smaller communities and people who don't have lighting designers practicing, to be able to have a way to understand how lighting can best be used in outdoor environments.
Yeah, no, the human impact was something in the past. Now we're looking at, like you're saying, the plants and now animals, and I think the practice has become, not just lighting one point in a space. It's all these things in combined, which makes it interesting every day. Like that's the challenge. And I think when you mentioned right at the beginning is you were able to do the artistic approach, but the technical and science of it is always evolving, which is what science is. And I think it's as a collective, as whole lighting designers in the world, we achieve. I think that's what we talk about all the time. We're in together, we're in a room, we're like talk about this and that, and those special solutions that's part of it. And sometimes you can't see that, but those solutions are so important.
The technology, science is the underpinning of good lighting. And even though it might be inherent in our judgments already, it's something that must be part of design.
And it's definitely helping these days to achieve a little bit more control, by whatever you mean by control, like the dimming a little bit during those curfew hours, right? Those are those special moments and things. Yeah. Fantastic. I think I'm going to see where the moderator is. Do we have any questions?
Questions.
I don't see any questions. No questions here. I still have questions.
I do hear snoring, but no questions.
Well, do you have, do you think, because we're talking about, lighting and the environment, and we're touching base on so many different aspects now, do you think lighting designers should be, on every project? Like, should be a lighting designer doing all the lighting?
Yeah, I'm not sure that's always necessary on a project. There are some projects where that degree of care is needed, but I don't want to shortchange our engineers and others who also do lighting. And where we like to control lighting when lighting design, whenever it is important to our client. So if our client says, "Oh, that's back of the house, we're not going to pay you to do that."
Yeah.
We're not going to argue with them. They have hopefully competent engineers who will do a good job in that case. And there are many competent engineers out there who could do that and much more. So we don't insist on it on our projects, but there are some where by the time we describe what it is we want to do, we realize we're doing all the lighting of the project. So it really is a project by project basis. I'm not interested necessarily in doing all those other areas. And that's one of the reasons we've stayed small.
Yeah.
We've just worked with the engineers, or in some cases design build contractors, to assist them in those other areas where we don't feel we need to have that impact, or the client doesn't want us to do it.
Yeah, that's interesting. 'Cause I know the session is talking from country to country, and here is just Canada, the US, and Toronto to St. Louis, but it's very similar.
Yep.
I think having this small practice and kind of picking and choosing and doing what is needed, and you're right. There's the client, and I'm not going to pay you to do the back of house stuff, but which is fine.
Yeah.
But it's very similar actually. So it's good to tell everybody else is that we're all in the same boat. From South US, North Canada, UK, everything is very similar. We're all doing the similar type of work.
There's some questions.
Yeah, we have a few questions. I think there's one that says, what do you both think is the next step for the lighting design practice as an industry? That's kind of similar to what you were mentioning, but I guess in general, that the big question I think we have all the time at the IALD conferences, what are we going? What direction are we as an industry, or do we want certification? Do you want to be able to stamp drawings maybe, or do we just want to have some fun and really stay behind?
Yeah, well, that's a very deep discussion.
Yes.
I think in some cases it used to be very difficult because we weren't getting the respect, and nobody would, well, do you have a lighting certificate or something? Well, no, we don't have licensure or certification. Some of that's evolving now with the IALD's influence, but we're not to a point where that's happening. Engineers are still stamping those drawings, or you're an engineer on your staff, and they don't really care if you do lighting or not. That's who's doing it. But I think long term, I'd like to think that we get to a plateau where the lighting designer has a thorough certification at the very least. I mean, licensure would be nice, but that's not going to happen in my lifetime.
Yeah. Let's see what else is here. Let's see. There's one. Can you describe how the distribution with LED fixtures is evolved from traditional ones, and how that helps keep uplighting on facades and not into the sky?
Yeah. There was another question about that. What if you couldn't do lighting upwards and so forth? One thing that, if you know what you're doing, at least with solid state lighting, there are a couple of things that you can take and make your advantage. And if you are doing uplighting, or even if it's accent lighting, exterior downward light, is the precision that one can get from LED sources. And precision leads to control, which leads to putting light where you want it and not where you want it. So from that standpoint, I think that was revolutionary. And knowing that we all used to be out there with metal halide and high pressure sodium arc tubes and trying to wrap bathtub shaped reflectors around them. And those days were tough because even with them, it was hard to control spill light and glare. I think we have more tools now and we can do it more effectively. Especially when we do work in historic areas, we're very conscious of positioning of cornice lines and so forth and using those as reflectors back down.
Yeah.
If there are places where you can't do uplighting, if that's the case, that's the challenge, and you do the best you can and come up with a design that you hope is worthy of the structure.
Yeah, and that's the challenge. That's the challenge. Yeah, yeah, definitely. The technology of optics definitely helps us not just reduce spill light and things, but the precision of putting light where is needed only, right? Not using 50% of the light on the facade, like if we're lighting a facade, and the rest of it is just going elsewhere. And that's the efficiency, I think, of the technology that we're embracing.
Yeah.
So it's 1 o'clock. I can't remember if we're finish at 1. If someone can help us
should,
out
yeah.
here.
I think Amy's going to take over from here, right?
Yeah, thank you both so much. It was a really great interview. And we really appreciate you both just letting us into your world and allowing us to get to know you better. So it's always nice to talk to other right brain, left brain people. It's very inspiring. Just real quick, I know, Marcel, you talked briefly about Randy's new venture, but Randy, do you want to elaborate at all or let everyone know the latest in your world?
Well, I don't want to use this as a promo, but yeah, our firm, Randy Burkett Lighting Design, is we have unified with or formed a union with Envision Lighting, which Lisa Reed is was the owner of that practice, and we're now a single practice. So it's exciting, and we've pretty much doubled the size of our firm, and that was one of our issues. We didn't have the manpower to continue to do some of the things we wanted to do. So I think we're looking forward to the coming days.
Well, great.
Thanks.
Well, best of luck to you.
Yeah.
And thank you to everyone who joined us today. Be sure to join us again for Designer by Designer on July 28th, when Randy will be interviewing Marissa Tucci. And registration to join us on Zoom will open soon. And of course, you can always view any of the Designer by Designer interviews and all of the IALD's video content on the IALD YouTube channel. Be sure to subscribe. And thanks again to our sponsors and today's audience for watching. Stay tuned and see you next time.
Nice to see you all.
Bye-bye.